When a baby girl first cried out in the mighty city of Rome, her wails echoed not just within the walls of her home, but against the backdrop of a society that had already charted her course. Unlike her brothers, who would be groomed for the forum or the battlefield, her fate was drawn on a different map, one of family, virtue, and subordination. From that very instant, the Roman woman's journey of survival began, a journey marked by profound limitations, yet also by resilient efforts to discover meaning and self-worth. Roman society was profoundly patriarchal, where men held ultimate authority. At the heart of this structure lay the concept of patria potestas, the power of the father. The father, or the male head of the household, wielded almost absolute control over his children, including his daughters, until their marriage. This power extended to nearly every aspect of their lives, from owning property to arranging their marriages. Imagine a toddler growing up in a world where the voice of her father, grandfather, or any male relative resonated as an unquestionable command. This wasn't merely a legal rule. It was an unspoken dictate deeply embedded in every corner of daily life, shaping how a woman was perceived and how she was expected to behave. From a young age, a Roman girl was meticulously taught about her predefined role, to become an ideal matrona. The image of the matrona was more than just a wife and mother. She was an emblem of chastity, pudicitia, loyalty, fides, and piety, pietas, towards her family and the gods. She was expected to be a skilled household manager, a faithful spouse, and a devoted mother. A woman's virtue wasn't just in her words, but in her actions, how she dressed, how she spoke, and especially her ability to weave. Weaving wasn't just a practical skill, it was a powerful symbol of diligence and domestic virtue. A woman skilled with the loom was considered respectable, directly contributing to her family's prosperity and reputation. However, a Roman girl's life also differed significantly based on the social class into which she was born. A girl from a patrician or equestrian family would grow up in wealth, likely receiving a better education, often at home with private tutors, and groomed for a politically or economically advantageous marriage to another influential family. Despite these privileges, they faced immense pressure to uphold their family's reputation and status, and their marriages were rarely based on personal affection. Girls from the plebeian class might experience a less lavish upbringing, possibly engaging in labor to help their families from an early age. Their marriages were often simpler, focused on economic stability. They might have more freedom of movement and social interaction than their upper-class counterparts, but their lives were also considerably harder. At the very bottom of society were enslaved girls. For them, life was an endless cycle of subjugation and relentless labor. Born into slavery, they possessed no freedom or rights whatsoever. They could be sold at any moment, exploited for their labor, and even subjected to abuse. The very concept of family, for them, was often fragile, as their children could be taken away and sold. This dependence on the family was not merely a limitation but also a crucial mechanism for survival. In a society where individuals had limited self-determination, the strength of one's lineage and familial networks served as the soul's shield. A woman with a powerful and supportive family would gain a certain level of protection and status. Conversely, if her family's standing weakened, she could face immense hardship. The primary and most fundamental difficulty a Roman woman had to accept from birth was the lack of personal agency. Her life was meticulously arranged by the expectations, laws, and interests of the men in her family. From her education to her predetermined marriage, everything seemed to lie beyond her control. Yet, even within these confines, there were glimmers of resilience. Roman women learned to adapt, finding meaning in their roles, and sometimes circumventing the rules to carve out their own spaces. Their lives are a vivid testament to how individuals can survive and thrive, even when bound by the invisible chains of society. The dawn of a Roman woman was not the dawn of freedom, but the dawn of a quiet yet profound struggle to define herself in a world that had already sought to define her destiny. The early years of a Roman girl's life were a fleeting period of relative innocence, quickly giving way to a structured preparation for the formidable responsibilities that awaited her. Unlike her brothers, whose education often focused on rhetoric, philosophy, and military strategy to prepare them for public life, a Roman girl's learning was meticulously tailored to equip her for her designated sphere, the home and the family. Every lesson, every skill acquired, was a deliberate step towards her ultimate role as a wife and mother, a living embodiment of the matrona ideal. For most Roman girls, particularly those from the less affluent classes, formal schooling was basic, if it existed at all. The foundational education often began at home, with parents, or sometimes literate slaves, teaching them to read, write, and perform simple arithmetic. These were practical skills, essential for managing a household, keeping accounts, and communicating effectively within the domestic sphere. A girl might learn to read from wax tablets or papyrus scrolls, practicing her letters and numbers. The emphasis wasn't on critical thinking or scholarly pursuit, but on practical literacy for daily life. However, a crucial and perhaps the most emphasized aspect of a Roman girl's education was the mastery of domestic skills. From a very young age, girls were taught the intricate art of spinning and weaving. They would sit beside their mothers and female relatives, learning to prepare wool, operate the loom, and produce fabric. This wasn't just a chore. It was a deeply ingrained cultural expectation and a cornerstone of female virtue. A woman's skill with the loom was a direct reflection of her diligence and her family's good standing. It symbolized her ability to contribute economically to the household by producing clothes and textiles, reducing the need for costly external purchases. Imagine a young girl, perhaps no older than 5 or 6, already learning the rhythmic motions of spinning, her tiny fingers grappling with the wool, knowing instinctively that this skill would one day define her worth. Beyond weaving, girls were trained in all aspects of household management. They learned about food preparation, how to oversee household slaves, if the family owned any, budgeting for daily expenses, and the general upkeep of the home. This practical training was vital. A Roman wife wasn't just a figurehead. She was often the de facto chief operating officer of the domestic sphere, responsible for the smooth functioning of a complex household unit. This demanded organizational skills, an understanding of economics, and the ability to command respect from those beneath her. For girls from wealthier families, the scope of education was broader, though still primarily geared towards domestic and social refinement. They might attend private schools or, more commonly, receive instruction from private tutors at home. These tutors, often educated Greek slaves, would teach them more advanced literature, poetry, and sometimes even a smattering of Greek language. The purpose of such learning wasn't to prepare them for a public career, but to make them cultured companions for their husbands, capable of engaging in intellectual conversations at social gatherings and demonstrating their family's sophistication. They might learn to play a musical instrument, sing, or dance, all skills considered accomplishments befitting a lady of their status. However, even with these expanded opportunities, the core message remained: this knowledge was to serve the family, not to launch an independent life or career. The stark reality was that a Roman girl's education was a trade-off, exchanging the carefree innocence of childhood for a rigorous preparation that left little room for deviation. The pressure from family was immense, a silent but persistent force guiding every step of her learning. She was constantly reminded of the expectations of her future husband and his family, of the need to be a dutiful wife and a fertile mother. Any personal aspirations that might conflict with these predefined roles were gently, yet firmly, suppressed. Consider the emotional impact on a young girl. While boys were encouraged to be ambitious and outward-looking, girls were taught self-restraint and inward focus. Their success would not be measured by triumphs in the forum or on the battlefield, but by the quiet competence of their domestic management and the number of healthy children they bore. This early conditioning instilled a deep sense of responsibility and, perhaps, a subtle acceptance of their predetermined path. They were learning to survive by fulfilling societal expectations, understanding that their security and status hinged on their ability to embody the virtues of a Roman matrona. This early preparation, though limiting, was the essential foundation upon which their entire adult lives would be built, teaching them not only practical skills but also the psychological resilience needed to navigate a world largely controlled by men. For a Roman girl, marriage was not a romantic ideal but a profound social and economic contract, often sealing her destiny with a union preordained by her family. It was the most significant transition in her life, a moment when she moved from the potestas, power, of her father to, in most cases, the manus, hand, of her husband, or at least into his household. This transition, while bringing a new identity, rarely brought true autonomy. The primary purpose of marriage in Roman society was not love or personal happiness, but the production of legitimate children to ensure the continuation of the family line, inheritance, and social status. For the elite, marriage was also a crucial tool for forging political alliances and consolidating wealth. A well-chosen marriage could elevate a family's standing, secure a powerful ally, or expand its economic reach. This pragmatic approach meant that the desires of the individual bride, and often the groom, were secondary to the strategic interests of their respective families. Roman girls typically married at a remarkably young age, often between 12 and 14 years old, sometimes even younger in the upper classes, just shortly after puberty. Boys, by contrast, usually married in their late teens or early 20s, leading to significant age gaps between spouses. Imagine a child bride barely out of her innocent games, suddenly thrust into the complex world of adult responsibility, expected to manage a household, oversee slaves, and conceive heirs. This stark reality contrasted sharply with the romanticized notions of marriage found in many modern cultures. There were primarily two forms of marriage in Rome, each with distinct implications for the bride's legal status. Cum manu, with hand in this older, more traditional form, the wife passed completely into the legal control of her husband, or his paterfamilias if he was still alive. She essentially became like a daughter to him, losing all legal ties to her birth family and gaining inheritance rights within her new husband's family. Her property also transferred to her husband. This form offered less independence but perhaps more security, as she was fully integrated into her new household. While prevalent in the early Republic, it became less common by the late Republic and early Empire. Sine manu, without hand, this form became increasingly popular, especially among the wealthier classes, by the late Republic. In a sine manu marriage, the wife remained under the legal control of her own paterfamilias. This meant she retained her legal ties to her birth family and, crucially, could retain control over her own property and dowry. She was not legally absorbed into her husband's family, which gave her a degree of financial and legal independence that was rare for women in the ancient world. While she moved into her husband's home, her legal identity remained tied to her father's house. This offered both advantages, property rights, and disadvantages, still subject to her father's potestas, and potentially less integrated into her marital family. Regardless of the form, the lack of personal choice for the bride was a pervasive burden. Marriages were almost universally arranged by the fathers, or male guardians, of the families involved. Consent was technically required, but for girls, non-objection was often interpreted as consent. A daughter could, in theory, refuse a match if the proposed husband was of demonstrably bad character. But such defiance was rare and carried significant social repercussions. The pressure to accept her family's choice was immense, as her cooperation directly impacted her family's honor and prospects. To refuse meant not only dishonoring her family but also potentially jeopardizing her own future, as unmarried women held little status or security in Roman society. The dowry dose was an integral part of the marriage contract, especially for the propertied classes. This was property, money, or goods provided by the bride's family to the groom upon marriage. Its purpose was to contribute to the financial burdens of the marriage, honora matrimoniae, and to provide financial security for the wife in case of divorce or her husband's death. While managed by the husband during the marriage, the dowry was legally distinct and generally expected to be returned to the wife or her family if the marriage dissolved. For many families, providing a substantial dowry was a major financial undertaking, and its absence could effectively prevent a woman from marrying into a respectable family. The size of the dowry often reflected the social standing of the bride's family, and could influence her treatment within her new household. Imagine the young bride, barely a teenager, standing at the altar, or participating in the less formal usus, cohabitation for a year, ceremony. Her thoughts might not have been of love, but of duty, of the heavy weight of expectations. She was marrying not just a man, but an entire family, and aligning herself with their destiny. This fundamental truth, that her marriage was a transaction, a bond of contract rather than passion, was a defining difficulty. Yet, it was through accepting and navigating these arranged unions that Roman women found their path to survival, transforming themselves from daughters into wives, and ultimately, into the matronas who were the backbone of Roman society. They adapted to their new roles, learned to manage their households, and sought to fulfill their primary purpose, to bear and raise the next generation of Roman citizens. Having entered the marital home, a Roman woman, regardless of her newfound title as mater familias, mother of the family, still found herself navigating a legal landscape heavily tilted towards male authority. This was arguably one of the most pervasive and defining difficulties of her existence. While Roman law, particularly during the late Republic and early Empire, offered women more freedoms regarding property than some other ancient societies, their fundamental civic and legal rights remained severely curtailed. They were, in essence, perpetual minors in the eyes of the law, forever under the symbolic, if not always direct, dominion of a male guardian. The most fundamental limitation was their exclusion from direct political life. Roman women could not vote, hold public office, or serve in the military. The grand orations in the Forum, the debates in the Senate, the clamor of the elections, these were exclusively male domains. A woman's influence in the political sphere had to be exercised indirectly, through her father, husband, or sons. While elite women might host powerful dinner parties or exert subtle pressure on their male relatives, their voices could never directly shape legislation or governance. This lack of a public political voice meant that laws affecting women were made for them, not by them, emphasizing their secondary status in the Roman state. A cornerstone of this legal subjugation was the institution of guardianship, tutela. With the exception of the Vestal Virgins, every adult Roman woman was legally required to have a male guardian tutor. This guardian could be her father, husband, in cum manu marriages, or another male relative designated by law or will. While a woman could manage her day-to-day affairs, any significant legal transaction, such as selling substantial property, making a will, manumitting a slave, or entering into a contract, required her guardian's formal consent. This was not always a burdensome reality for all women. A benevolent or absentee guardian might sign off on documents without much fuss. However, the principle of needing male approval underscored a fundamental distrust in a woman's capacity for independent legal judgment. It implicitly stated that women were intellectually weaker or more impulsive, thus requiring male oversight to protect their interests, and more often, the interests of the family patrimony. The evolution of guardianship laws, particularly the Lex Voconia, 169 BC, and later developments, did offer some progress, however. The Lex Voconia aimed to limit the inheritance of women to prevent them from accumulating vast wealth, but paradoxically, it also led to an increase in sine manu marriages, where a woman retained her legal ties to her birth family, and thus, more control over her dowry and property. Furthermore, by the Augustan age, the ius trium liberorum, right of 3 children, exempted freeborn women who had borne 3 children, or 4 for free women, from the requirement of a guardian. This reform, while primarily aimed at encouraging childbirth, inadvertently granted a significant degree of legal autonomy to mothers, acknowledging their contribution to the state through reproduction. Yet, for many, the tutor remained a constant presence, a reminder of their subordinate legal standing. Property rights for Roman women were complex. While they could own property, especially in sine manu marriages where their dowry and other acquired wealth remained legally distinct from their husband's assets, the management of such property often required the tutor's approval. A woman could use her personal wealth for her own expenses or to contribute to the household, but major transactions were still subject to male oversight. This meant that while a rich woman might be financially independent in practice, her legal ability to act on that independence was always conditional. This forced many women, particularly those of means, to rely on male agents or trusted family members to handle their substantial affairs, adding another layer of dependency. The Roman legal system also presented significant challenges in the event of divorce or widowhood. While women could initiate divorce, proving grounds for it could be difficult, and the implications for her future were immense. She would typically return to her father's household, if he was alive, or rely on her dowry for support. For widows, especially those without adult sons, the legal complexities of managing their deceased husband's estate could be daunting, often requiring the guidance of male relatives. The pressure to remarry, particularly for younger widows, was also common, as it provided continued financial and social security. In essence, the restricted legal rights of Roman women created a pervasive sense of living under male authority. This was not always an oppressive daily reality, especially if a woman had a supportive father or husband. But the fundamental principle was clear. A woman's legal identity and capacity for independent action were always circumscribed by the male figures in her life. To survive, Roman women had to learn to navigate this legal labyrinth. They developed strategies of indirect influence, cultivated strong familial and social networks, and sometimes leveraged their personal charm or the sheer necessity of their circumstances to achieve their goals. Their resilience lay in their ability to operate effectively within these legal strictures, finding loopholes, building alliances, and proving their worth in a world where their legal voice was often muted. For a Roman woman, the ultimate validation of her existence, and indeed her primary duty within marriage, lay in childbearing. The cradle was often seen as the culmination of her purpose, particularly the delivery of healthy sons to carry on the family name and legacy. This immense pressure to procreate was not merely social. It was woven into the fabric of Roman law and morality. Failing to bear children, or worse, failing to produce male heirs, could lead to severe social stigma, disappointment from her husband's family, and even, in some cases, divorce. The expectation to bear children was paramount, especially for women of the elite classes. A large family signified prosperity and influence, and sons were essential for political continuity and military strength. This societal demand placed an enormous psychological burden on Roman wives. Imagine the anxiety that must have accompanied every pregnancy, the desperate hopes for a son, and the profound grief that followed a miscarriage or the death of an infant. This was not just a personal tragedy. It was a perceived failure of duty to her husband, his family, and to Rome itself. However, the path to motherhood was fraught with immense physical dangers and terrifying risks of mortality. Roman medicine, though advanced for its time in some areas, was rudimentary when it came to obstetrics. Knowledge of hygiene, sterile practices, and effective interventions during complicated births was severely limited. Childbirth was a leading cause of death for Roman women. Infection, hemorrhage, prolonged labor, and complications like eclampsia were constant threats. It wasn't uncommon for a woman to endure multiple pregnancies, each one a roll of the dice with her very life. The assistance during childbirth primarily came from midwives, obstetrics, rather than trained physicians. These women, often experienced and practical, possessed invaluable folk knowledge passed down through generations. They used natural remedies, provided comfort, and guided the mother through the process. However, their skills were limited by the lack of medical understanding of anatomy and pathology. In cases of severe dystocia, difficult labor, there was little they could do beyond offering encouragement and prayers. The sounds of a Roman birth were not just the cries of a new life, but often the strained grunts of the mother, the worried murmurs of female relatives, and the fervent pleas to the gods. The high rates of infant and child mortality compounded the emotional toll on Roman mothers. Even if a woman survived childbirth, her baby might not. Diseases, poor sanitation, and lack of pediatric care meant that many infants did not live past their first few years. For a mother, each child represented an investment of immense physical and emotional energy, only to be potentially snatched away by illness. The profound grief of losing a child was a common experience, yet women were expected to stoically endure such losses and continue their efforts to produce surviving offspring. Tombstone inscriptions often bear witness to this sorrow, commemorating children who died young, a heartbreaking testament to the fragility of life in ancient Rome. To cope with these immense pressures and risks, Roman women developed various strategies for survival. Reliance on female networks. Childbirth was a communal female experience. Mothers, sisters, aunts, and close friends would gather to support the laboring woman, offering emotional solace and practical assistance. This network provided a crucial emotional safety net in a physically dangerous process. Superstition and religious devotion. In the face of overwhelming medical uncertainty, women often turned to religious rites and magical charms to ensure a safe delivery and a healthy child. Prayers to goddesses like Juno Lucina, goddess of childbirth, or attempts to ward off evil spirits were common practices, providing a sense of control and hope in an otherwise uncontrollable situation. Stoicism and acceptance. Given the high risks, a degree of stoicism and acceptance of fate became a necessary psychological defense mechanism. Women learned to endure pain and loss, viewing it as an inevitable part of their biological destiny. This quiet resilience allowed them to continue fulfilling their duties despite the omnipresent threat. The ius trium liberorum as an incentive. As mentioned in the previous chapter, the right of 3 children for freeborn women, for freed women, offered a tantalizing glimpse of legal freedom from guardianship. This legal incentive, while primarily for the state's benefit in increasing population, provided a tangible reward for successful motherhood, making the arduous journey seem more worthwhile. The physical and emotional landscape of childbearing was arguably the most visceral difficulty a Roman woman faced. It was a constant reminder of her biological function, the fragility of life, and her subordinate position within a society that valued her reproductive capacity above all else. Yet, It was also through this very challenge that many found their deepest sense of purpose and connection, cementing their place within the family and contributing, literally, to the very fabric of Roman civilization. The price of motherhood was steep, but for countless women, it was a price they were willing to pay for survival, status, and the hope of seeing their lineage continue. Once a Roman woman entered her husband's home, whether through a cum manu or sine manu marriage, her daily existence largely revolved around the domestic sphere. This was her primary domain, a complex ecosystem where her skills as a manager, her adherence to social norms, and her personal virtue were constantly on display. Far from being a simple housewife, the Roman matrona was the astute and often tireless chief executive of the household, responsible for its smooth operation and the welfare of its inhabitants. Her days were filled with a multitude of tasks, ranging from the mundane to the highly strategic. At the core of her duties was household management. This involved overseeing the numerous slaves, if the family owned them, who performed the bulk of the manual labor. A matrona had to delegate tasks, ensure they were carried out efficiently, and manage disputes among the household staff. This required not only authority but also a keen understanding of human nature and effective leadership. She would supervise the preparation of meals, the cleaning of the house, and the general maintenance of the living environment. For a woman of means, this role might involve directing dozens, or even hundreds, of people. Crucially, the Roman woman was also often the de facto financial administrator of the domestic economy. While her husband handled external business and large-scale investments, she managed the daily budget, ensuring that household expenses were met, provisions were acquired, and resources were not squandered. She would meticulously track expenditures, decide on purchases, and sometimes even handle the sale of household produce or goods. This required a practical understanding of accounting and a shrewd eye for value, directly contributing to the family's economic stability and prosperity. Many Roman epitaphs praise wives not just for their virtue but also for being lanifica, wool worker, and domiceda, staying at home, signifying their dedication to domestic industry and prudent management. Beyond the practicalities, the Roman woman was the guardian of her family's reputation and moral standing. Her conduct, speech, and appearance were expected to reflect the highest standards of Roman virtue. She was the living embodiment of pudicitia, modesty/chastity, frugalitas, frugality/prudence, and industria, diligence. Any perceived lapse in her behavior could bring shame not only upon herself but upon her husband and her entire lineage. This constant scrutiny placed immense pressure on women to adhere strictly to societal norms, to always present a dignified and respectable front, even in the privacy of their own homes. Weaving and spinning remained a symbolic and often practical duty for many Roman women, particularly in the early Republic and among the less wealthy. Even for elite women who had slaves to perform such tasks, engaging in these activities was a display of industria and a nod to traditional values. The loom was often seen as a symbol of female domesticity and virtue, and a woman's skill in producing fine textiles was a source of pride. The legendary Roman matron Cornelia, mother of the Gracchi brothers, was famed for personally spinning wool for her family, a testament to how deeply ingrained this virtue was. As a mother, her role extended to the early education and moral upbringing of her children. While boys would eventually move on to tutors or public schools, and girls would receive instruction in domestic skills, the mother laid the crucial foundation. She instilled values, taught basic literacy, and nurtured their development. This intimate connection with her children was a source of immense personal satisfaction and a vital contribution to the perpetuation of Roman society. To survive the rigorous demands of domestic life, Roman women developed strategies that combined practicality with psychological resilience. Mastery of management. They embraced their role as managers, taking pride in their ability to run a complex household efficiently. This provided a tangible sense of accomplishment and control in a world where broader public influence was denied. Building a network of support within the household, a matrona often relied on trusted slaves or freed women to assist her. Outside, she cultivated relationships with female relatives and friends, creating a network for advice, emotional support, and shared experiences. These informal networks were vital for navigating the challenges of marriage, child-rearing, and household crises. Finding meaning in duty. By fulfilling their roles with diligence and virtue, women found a profound sense of purpose. Their contributions, though confined to the private sphere, were indispensable to the functioning of Roman society. This internal validation, combined with the respect earned from their families and community, allowed them to thrive within their prescribed roles. Subtle influence. While their power was largely indirect, a clever matrona could exert considerable influence over her husband and children. By offering wise counsel, subtle persuasion, and managing the domestic environment, she shaped the lives of those around her, securing her own position and the well-being of her family. Domestic life for a Roman woman was far from passive. It was a sphere of immense responsibility, constant effort, and significant influence. Her survival depended not just on fulfilling the expectations of her society, but on excelling at them, transforming the art of management, and virtue into a profound contribution to the very foundations of the Roman world. While the preceding chapters have touched upon the varied lives of free Roman women, it's crucial to acknowledge the stark and often brutal reality faced by enslaved women. For them, the concept of difficulties was often an understatement. Their lives were a perpetual struggle for basic human dignity, autonomy, and often mere survival. They occupied the absolute lowest rung of Roman society, stripped of nearly all rights and subjected to the arbitrary will of their owners. The origins of enslaved women were diverse, yet equally tragic. Many were captives of war, brought back from conquered territories across the vast Roman Empire. Others were born into slavery, the unfortunate offspring of enslaved mothers, a legal status inherited from birth regardless of the father's freedom. Some might have been sold into slavery due to debt, poverty, or as punishment for crimes. Regardless of how they became enslaved, their common fate was the loss of freedom and the complete subjection to another's will. The daily lives of enslaved women were characterized by unrelenting labor and often harsh conditions. Their tasks varied widely depending on the household or estate they served. In large, aristocratic homes, enslaved women performed a myriad of domestic duties: cooking, cleaning, fetching water, spinning and weaving wool, serving at banquets, and tending to the children of their owners. They might work in the kitchen, as chambermaids, bath attendants, or even as personal beauticians for the mistress of the house. On rural estates, enslaved women toiled in the fields alongside men, performing arduous agricultural tasks, or engaged in specialized labor like olive oil production or grape harvesting. Their work was often demanding, physically exhausting, and offered little respite. Beyond the sheer physical toil, enslaved women faced the constant and terrifying threat of physical and sexual abuse. Without legal protection, they were vulnerable to the whims of their owners, who held absolute power over their bodies. Sexual exploitation was tragically common, with enslaved women often forced into sexual relationships with their masters, sons, or even male guests. This was not considered rape under Roman law, as enslaved individuals were viewed as property, not persons with rights. Pregnancy resulting from such abuse meant their children would also be born into slavery, perpetuating this cycle of bondage. The psychological toll of this constant vulnerability, of being property rather than a person, must have been immense. The concept of a stable family unit was often denied to enslaved women, While they might form partnerships with enslaved men, these unions were not legally recognized as marriages. Their children, if born, automatically belonged to their owner and could be sold away at any time, severing the most fundamental of human bonds. Imagine the heartbreak of a mother knowing her child could be taken from her without warning, perhaps to be sold to a distant land, never to be seen again. This constant threat of separation underscored their profound lack of autonomy and the brutal nature of their existence. Survival for enslaved women was a testament to sheer resilience and, often, a desperate search for any glimmer of hope or agency. Building informal networks. Within the enslaved community, informal bonds of solidarity and support often formed. Sharing burdens, offering comfort, and subtly resisting oppressive conditions through small acts of defiance or mutual aid were crucial for psychological survival. Seeking manumission, the ultimate dream for many enslaved individuals, both male and female, was manumission, the act of being formally freed by their owner. This could be granted through an owner's will, by purchasing their own freedom, if they managed to save enough money from small earnings or gifts, or as a reward for long and faithful service. While manumission didn't immediately grant full Roman citizenship, it was a profound step towards personal autonomy and dignity. The prospect of manumission provided a powerful incentive for enduring hardship and performing duties diligently. Developing indispensable skills, some enslaved women, particularly those with specialized skills like midwifery, weaving fine fabrics, managing complex households, or even providing intellectual services, like teaching children, might find themselves in more favorable positions. Their indispensability could lead to better treatment, reduced physical labor, or a greater likelihood of eventual freedom. Subtle resistance. Open rebellion was dangerous and rare, but enslaved women might engage in subtle forms of resistance, feigning illness, working slowly, misplacing items, or maintaining a defiant spirit in their private thoughts. These small acts of defiance, though risky, affirmed a sense of self that the system sought to crush. The lives of enslaved women represent the most extreme end of the spectrum of difficulties faced by Roman women. They endured systemic dehumanization, forced labor, and constant vulnerability. Yet, even in the face of such overwhelming oppression, their stories, though largely unrecorded by Roman historians, speak to an indomitable spirit of survival, a persistent yearning for freedom, and an enduring capacity for human connection amidst profound adversity. Their silent struggles underscore the sharp inequalities embedded within Roman society, and remind us of the immense human cost of such a hierarchical system. Amidst the formidable duties and constraints that defined a Roman woman's life, there remained a facet of existence dedicated to personal well-being, social interaction, and the maintenance of self-worth, entertainment, and personal care. These activities, while often dictated by social norms and financial means, provided vital outlets for expression, relaxation, and the quiet assertion of individual identity. They were not mere frivolous pursuits but crucial mechanisms for coping with the relentless pressures of Roman society. For women of all social classes, albeit with vastly different access and experiences, the pursuit of personal hygiene and beauty was paramount. A Roman woman's appearance was a reflection not only of herself but also of her family's status and propriety. Elaborate bathhouses, both private and public, served as central hubs for cleanliness and social interaction. While public baths had separate sections or hours for women, they were still places for communal bathing, grooming, and light conversation. The ritual of bathing involved a complex sequence of cleansing, oiling, and scraping the skin, often followed by hair styling and makeup application. For elite women, this process could take hours, involving numerous enslaved attendants. Imagine the steam, the scent of oils, and the quiet murmurs of women exchanging news or gossip, a rare moment of collective respite. Cosmetics and elaborate hairstyles were integral to a Roman woman's presentation. They used white lead and chalk to lighten their complexions, red ochre or plant dyes for rouged cheeks and lips, and kohl to define their eyes. Eyebrows were often plucked and shaped, and sometimes false eyebrows made of mouse fur were used. Hair was a particular focus, with intricate styles involving braids, curls, and hairpieces, often made from the hair of enslaved women or conquered peoples. These elaborate coiffures, often requiring hours of work by skilled ornitresses, female hairdressers, were status symbols, signaling wealth and adherence to current fashions. While these beauty practices were certainly driven by societal expectations, they also offered women a means of personal adornment and creative expression, a way to sculpt their public image and perhaps, momentarily, feel a sense of control over their appearance. Beyond personal grooming, Roman women engaged in various forms of entertainment and social engagement. Banquets and dinner parties. For women of the elite, attending or hosting banquets was a significant social duty and pleasure. Unlike some Greek customs, Roman women were expected to recline and participate in the conversation alongside men. These gatherings were crucial for networking, maintaining social ties, and demonstrating their family's wealth and hospitality. They offered opportunities for intellectual discourse, the exchange of news, and the subtle exercise of influence. Theatrical performances and public games, while not always seated with men in the early Republic, women, especially during the Empire, attended plays, mimes, and even gladiatorial contests and chariot races. While their presence at more violent spectacles like gladiatorial games was sometimes debated by moralists, it was a common form of public entertainment. These events provided an escape from domestic routines and a chance to witness grand spectacles and communal excitement. Literary pursuits. For educated women, engaging with literature was a cherished pastime. They might read poetry, history, or philosophy, often with their husbands or in female literary circles. Some even composed their own poetry or engaged in intellectual debates, finding intellectual stimulation and a sense of personal fulfillment in learning. This was a private form of enjoyment, a quiet rebellion against the intellectual limitations often imposed by society. Religious festivals and processions. Participation in public religious ceremonies and festivals provided an opportunity for women to step outside the confines of their homes and engage with the broader community. These events, often colorful and lively, offered a sense of belonging and spiritual connection, allowing women to express their piety and socialize with other women. For women of the lower classes and free women, entertainment might be simpler: visits to less exclusive baths, attending local street performances, participating in neighborhood gossip, or simply enjoying the communal atmosphere of the marketplace. Their personal care routines might be less elaborate, but the desire to present themselves well and to find moments of joy remained. The constant effort to maintain a respectable appearance and engage in approved forms of entertainment was a complex act of survival. On one hand, it reinforced societal expectations and demands on women. On the other, it provided vital avenues for maintaining self-worth and mental well-being. These activities allowed women to assert identity in a society that often defined them by their relationships to men. Personal style and social engagement offered a subtle way to express individual tastes and character. Build networks. Social gatherings and shared activities fostered female friendships and support systems, crucial for navigating the challenges of life. Find respite. These moments of leisure provided a necessary break from domestic duties and the pressures of childbearing and family reputation. Demonstrate status. For elite women, their appearance and social calendar were powerful indicators of their family's wealth and prestige. In essence, entertainment and personal care were not just about pleasure, they were about resilience. They were the ways Roman women carved out small pockets of autonomy, expressed their individuality within prescribed boundaries, and found moments of joy and connection that reaffirmed their value in a world that often sought to diminish it. While the societal ideal for a Roman woman was a lifelong, stable marriage dedicated to procreation and domestic harmony, the reality was often far more fluid. Roman law, surprisingly, made divorce relatively easy for both men and women, especially by the late Republic and early Empire. This ease, however, belied the profound and often devastating consequences divorce could have for a woman, frequently plunging her into uncertainty and necessitating swift, often fateful, decisions about her future. Unlike many other ancient societies where divorce was rare or only permitted for men on very specific grounds, Roman law allowed for dissolution of marriage with considerable ease, often simply by mutual agreement, or even a declaration of intent from one party. For sine minor marriages, which became increasingly common, the wife was not legally bound to her husband's family, making separation relatively straightforward in legal terms. A husband could send his wife away, and a wife, if her paterfamilias or guardian agreed, could leave her husband. The reasons for divorce were varied and often pragmatic: a failure to produce children, especially male heirs, a desire for a more politically or economically advantageous union, accusations of infidelity, though the standards were far stricter for women, or simply a personal incompatibility. However, the implications of divorce for a woman were far more severe than for a man. Upon divorce, a woman would typically return to her birth family, if her father was still alive. If her father had died, or if her family was unable or unwilling to support her, her situation could become precarious. The dowry played a crucial role here. Roman law generally stipulated that the dowry should be returned to the wife or her paterfamilias upon divorce, as it was intended to support her in the marriage. However, the process of reclaiming it could be lengthy and complex, especially if the husband was unwilling or unable to return it immediately. Without her dowry or family support, a divorced woman faced potential financial destitution, a terrifying prospect in a society that offered little in the way of social safety nets for independent women. Furthermore, losing custody of her children was a common and heartbreaking consequence for a divorced Roman woman. Roman law generally placed children under the patria potestas of their father. While there might be informal arrangements, the legal right to the children rested with the husband. This meant that a woman, after years of bearing and raising her offspring, could be forced to leave them behind, an emotional wrench that deeply impacted her future and emotional well-being. This vulnerability made the decision to initiate divorce incredibly difficult for many mothers, often forcing them to endure unhappy or even abusive marriages to remain with their children. The pressure to remarry after divorce or widowhood was immense, especially for younger women. An unmarried woman, regardless of her age, held little social standing and faced economic insecurity. Remarriage offered a pathway back to social respectability, financial stability, and the opportunity to bear more children, which was still a paramount duty. For women, remarriage was not just a personal choice but often a necessary strategy for survival. This could mean entering another arranged marriage, perhaps with a man chosen by her family for practical reasons, or even a marriage to an older man whose established position offered security. Consider the emotional landscape of such a decision. A woman might leave a marriage marked by unhappiness or neglect, hoping for a better life, only to find herself isolated and economically vulnerable. She might then have to accept a new marriage, perhaps with a man she did not know well, simply to secure her future. This constant cycle of adaptation, of moving from one male authority to another, highlighted her limited agency in shaping her own life course. Yet, it also showcased her remarkable resilience and pragmatism. Roman women, faced with these harsh realities, learned to prioritize practicality. Personal affection often took a backseat to the need for economic security and social standing. Remarriage, even if not ideal, was a means to an end. Leverage family support. A strong birth family could be a lifeline after divorce, providing a temporary home and assisting with the return of the dowry. This underscored the critical importance of familial networks. Cultivate resilience. The repeated transitions, the potential loss of children, and the need to adapt to new households demanded immense emotional fortitude. Roman women developed a quiet stoicism in the face of these personal upheavals. Utilize legal knowledge, if possible for wealthier women, understanding their rights regarding dowry and property in sine manu marriages was crucial. They might employ legal agents or advisors to ensure their financial interests were protected. Divorce and remarriage were not just legal processes. They were deeply personal crossroads that tested a Roman woman's strength, adaptability, and her ability to make fateful decisions that dictated her future. They laid bare the unequal power dynamics of Roman society, where a man's ability to sever ties often brought him freedom, while for a woman, it heralded a new set of challenges and the urgent imperative to rebuild her life. In a society where so much of a Roman woman's life was governed by the practicalities of family, status, and survival, religion and spirituality offered a vital counterbalance. For many, it was a profound source of comfort, community, and even a unique form of agency, providing a sanctuary where the rigid social hierarchies of the secular world sometimes softened, and divine favor offered hope amidst daily struggles. Religious practice in Rome was deeply intertwined with both the public and private spheres. Within the household domus, the woman often played a central, almost priestly, role in maintaining the family cult. She would lead daily prayers and offerings to the Lauras, household gods, and the Penates, gods of the larder/store cupboard, at the family altar, Narration. This was not merely a chore. It was a sacred duty, ensuring the spiritual well-being and prosperity of her entire family. Her piety was considered crucial for attracting divine favor and warding off misfortune. Imagine the quiet reverence as a matrona poured libations or offered incense, her whispers connecting her kin to the unseen forces that governed their lives. This private religious authority offered a significant sense of purpose and subtle power within her own home. Beyond the domestic altar, Roman women actively participated in various public religious festivals and ceremonies. These events, often colorful and grand, provided a rare opportunity to step outside the confines of the home and engage with the broader community. They would join processions, attend sacrifices, and offer prayers at temples dedicated to a vast pantheon of gods and goddesses. Participation in these public rites was not just a display of piety, but also a social occasion, allowing women to connect with friends and neighbors, share experiences, and reinforce their communal identity. Deities associated with fertility, childbirth, and domestic life, such as Juno Lucina, were particularly revered by women, who would offer prayers for safe deliveries and healthy children, seeking divine intervention in matters beyond human control. However, the most extraordinary example of a Roman woman's religious influence lay with the Vestal Virgins. These elite priestesses of the goddess Vesta held a unique and unparalleled position in Roman society. Chosen from aristocratic families at a young age, typically 6 to 10, they served for 30 years, during which they took vows of chastity and dedicated their lives to tending the sacred flame of Vesta in her temple in the Forum. This flame was believed to be inextricably linked to the fate of Rome itself. In exchange for their service and profound sacrifice of marriage and motherhood, Vestal virgins enjoyed unprecedented privileges and autonomy. They were exempted from male guardianship, could own and manage their own property, make wills, and even testify in court without a male representative. rights denied to almost all other Roman women. They were treated with immense reverence, afforded special seats at public games, and could intercede on behalf of citizens. Their very existence was a testament to the immense power and respect that could be garnered through sacred service, representing a profound exception to the general rule of female subordination. As the Roman Empire expanded, so too did its religious landscape. The influx of new mystery cults from the East, such as those dedicated to Isis, Cybele, or Mithras, gained considerable popularity. These cults often appealed directly to women, offering more personal and emotional forms of worship, often with promises of salvation or rebirth. In many of these cults, women were not merely participants but could hold significant positions, serving as priestesses or initiates, and finding a deeper spiritual connection than traditional Roman state cults often provided. This burgeoning religious diversity allowed women to explore different spiritual paths, finding comfort and meaning in ways that resonated with their individual experiences. For countless Roman women, religion offered a vital coping mechanism for the harsh realities of their lives. It provided a sense of purpose. Their role in household cults and public ceremonies gave them a clear, valuable purpose beyond domestic labor. Hope and solace. In the face of high child mortality, the dangers of childbirth, and the capriciousness of fate, prayers and offerings provided psychological comfort and a sense of divine protection. Community and belonging. Religious festivals fostered connections with other women and the wider community, breaking down social isolation. Avenues for influence. For Vestal virgins, religion provided direct power and legal autonomy. For others, piety could enhance their social standing and respect. Emotional expression. Mystery cults, in particular, allowed for more intense emotional and personal engagement, fulfilling spiritual needs that a more formal state religion might not address. In a world where women's voices were often muted and their actions confined, their engagement with the divine offered a powerful, personal space of agency and resilience. Through their prayers, rituals, and sometimes their profound religious dedication, Roman women found not just spiritual comfort, but a fundamental way to survive and thrive, imbuing their lives with a sacred dimension that transcended earthly limitations. While the idealized Roman woman was a diligent matrona focused solely on her household, the economic realities of Roman society often necessitated, and sometimes enabled, women to step beyond the confines of their domestic roles and engage in the world of commerce and labor. This was a challenging path, fraught with social disapproval and legal hurdles, yet countless women found ways to become entrepreneurs, shopkeepers, and skilled workers, carving out a degree of economic independence and contributing vital income to their families. Their survival often depended not just on their domestic virtues, but on their shrewdness and resilience in the marketplace. The type of work a Roman woman engaged in was heavily influenced by her social class. For women of the lower classes, freedwomen, and even some enslaved women, under their owners' direction, direct involvement in manual labor or small-scale commerce was a necessity. They might work in shops, taverns, or markets. Epitaphs and legal documents occasionally reveal a glimpse of their diverse occupations. Shopkeepers and innkeepers. Many women ran small businesses, such as selling produce, fish, wine, or bread. They might own and operate taverns, taberni, or inns, serving travelers and locals alike. This required not only business acumen but also the ability to handle customers, manage inventory, and often oversee staff. Textile and clothing production. While weaving was a domestic skill, it also extended into professional production. Women worked as weavers, textresses, fullers, fulanikai, and garment makers, contributing to Rome's extensive textile industry. Food preparation. Beyond cooking for their own families, women worked as bakers, pistresses, millers, or street vendors selling prepared foods. Personal services. Many women found work as midwives, obstetrics, nurses, nutresses, wet nurses, or even ornitresses, hairdressers and beauticians, for wealthier women. Prostitution, tragically, was also a common, albeit stigmatized, means of survival for many women forced into dire economic circumstances. For women of the upper classes, direct manual labor was unthinkable. However, some wealthy Roman women engaged in large-scale entrepreneurship and investment. Operating through male agents or freedmen, who could legally represent them, they might own land and estates. Managing agricultural estates could be a significant undertaking, requiring oversight of vast properties, tenant farmers, and enslaved labor. Brickworks and potteries. Inscriptions on Roman bricks show that women sometimes owned or managed lucrative brick manufacturing businesses, demonstrating their involvement in major industries crucial for Rome's urban development. Shipping and trade. There's evidence of women investing in shipping ventures or engaging in trade, albeit usually through male proxies. The challenges for these female entrepreneurs and workers were significant. Legally, they still faced the hurdle of guardianship, tutela, for major transactions, even in sine manu marriages. While a tutor might readily give consent for routine business, operating a substantial enterprise still required male approval and often male legal representation. Socially, women in public-facing roles might face prejudice or a loss of modesty in the eyes of traditionalists. The ideal Roman woman was expected to remain largely within the home, making a public commercial presence somewhat unconventional, though tolerated out of necessity. Despite these hurdles, Roman women exhibited remarkable ingenuity and tenacity to survive and even thrive in the economic sphere. Necessity as the mother of invention, for many, especially free women and those from the working classes, economic activity was not a choice but a necessity for survival. They adapted, learned new skills, and took on any work available to feed themselves and their families. Leveraging existing skills, domestic skills like weaving, cooking, and childcare were directly transferable to commercial ventures, allowing women to monetize their inherent talents. Building trust networks. Establishing good reputations within their communities was crucial for shopkeepers and service providers. Trust and word-of-mouth recommendations were vital in securing repeat business. Using male proxies. Wealthy women found ways to circumvent legal limitations by employing trusted male agents, often freedmen or loyal relatives, to conduct business in their name. This allowed them to manage significant assets and ventures indirectly. Financial acumen. Whether managing a small stall or a large estate, women developed shrewd financial skills, budgeting, pricing, negotiating, that were essential for success in competitive markets. Finding independence. For some, economic activity, even if physically demanding, offered a degree of personal independence and a sense of accomplishment beyond the domestic sphere. It provided them with their own income, reducing their complete reliance on a husband or father. The economic lives of Roman women, though often overlooked in historical narratives dominated by male achievements, were a testament to their strength and adaptability. They proved that a woman's value extended far beyond the confines of the home, contributing significantly to the bustling Roman economy. Their presence in the marketplace, running businesses, and performing labor, stands as a powerful testament to their enduring capacity for survival and their unwavering determination to secure their own livelihoods and the well-being of their families. While Roman women were largely excluded from direct political power and public life, their survival and prosperity often hinged upon their mastery of a different kind of authority, indirect influence through robust social networks. In a society built on patronage, familial ties, and personal connections, the ability to cultivate relationships, exchange favors, and subtly shape opinions was an indispensable skill, particularly for women of the elite classes. This was their unseen power, a quiet force that moved beneath the surface of the grand male-dominated arena. At the heart of a Roman woman's influence lay her familial network. Her connections extended far beyond her immediate household to include her birth family, her father, brothers, aunts, and cousins, and her marital family, her husband's parents, siblings, and their spouses. These kinship ties were not just emotional bonds, they were strategic alliances. A woman could leverage her father's political standing to aid her husband's career, or use her husband's connections to assist a struggling brother. Maintaining these complex web of relationships, often through correspondence, visits, and the exchange of gifts, was a continuous and vital social chore. Beyond direct family, Roman women actively built and maintained broader social circles. This included friendships with other women, some of whom might be influential in their own right, and polite acquaintances with male figures of power. These networks were nurtured through various social engagements. Hosting and attending banquets. As discussed, Roman women participated in banquets, where they could engage in conversation, observe political dealings, and subtly advocate for their family's interests. The mater familias hosting such events was a vital part of her husband's public image and a key facilitator of his social connections. Visits and salutations, paying social calls, salutatio, to other prominent women and receiving visitors at home were daily rituals. These seemingly informal interactions were crucial for gathering intelligence, disseminating information, and reinforcing alliances. Gossip, rumor, and news traveled swiftly through these female networks, often shaping public opinion in ways that men might underestimate. Public appearances, attending plays, religious festivals, and even private gatherings provided opportunities to see and be seen, to solidify social standing, and to engage in polite, yet meaningful, social discourse. The true art of a Roman woman's influence lay in its indirectness and subtlety. She rarely issued direct commands or made overt political statements. Instead, she persuaded, advised, and appealed to the emotions and loyalties of the men in her life. This required keen intelligence, sharp observation, and a profound understanding of the personalities she was dealing with. She might whisper advice to her husband during a private moment, shaping his decisions before they were presented publicly. She could appeal to her son's filial piety to encourage a certain course of action. She might use her charm and wit to soften a difficult negotiation or to smooth over a social faux pas. Her influence could extend to patronage, using her family's wealth and status to support artists, poets, or even struggling clients, thereby building a loyal following that indirectly bolstered her family's power. Notable women throughout Roman history exemplify this unseen power. Livia Drusilla, wife of Augustus, was a master of indirect influence. While she never held public office, her intelligence, dignity, and political acumen made her Augustus's trusted advisor. She was known to exert significant sway over imperial policy and succession, though always working behind the scenes, upholding the facade of the dutiful Roman wife. Similarly, women like Cornelia, mother of the Gracchi brothers, were celebrated for their moral guidance and intellectual influence on their sons, shaping future Roman leaders from within the domestic sphere. The survival strategy inherent in mastering social networks and indirect influence was multifold. Security. A strong network provided a safety net in times of crisis, whether personal, divorce, widowhood, or political, exile, loss of favor. Relatives and friends could offer shelter, financial assistance, or political intervention. Advancement. By skillfully fostering connections, a woman could significantly advance her husband's career, her children's prospects, and the overall standing of her family. Her social capital was an invaluable asset. Information flow. Being at the center of a bustling social network meant access to crucial information, allowing a woman to anticipate events, understand political undercurrents, and make informed decisions for her family. Personal agency. While not direct, the ability to influence powerful men and shape outcomes from behind the scenes offered a significant sense of personal agency and control in a world that otherwise limited her options. It was a recognition that true power isn't always overt, but can be wielded with subtlety and grace. In essence, Roman women transformed their social limitations into a unique form of strength. By becoming adept architects of relationships and masters of nuanced persuasion, they ensured not only their own survival but also played an indispensable, though often uncredited, role in the social and political dynamics of the Roman world. Their unseen power was a testament to their intelligence, adaptability, and an enduring capacity to shape their destiny through the intricate threads of human connection. While the vast majority of Roman women were steered towards domesticity and the practical arts, there existed a smaller, yet profoundly significant, group who found solace, expression, and even a degree of renown through the cultivation of their intellect and artistic talents. These were the unextinguished flames, women who, despite societal expectations, sought knowledge, engaged in philosophical discourse, and sometimes even left behind a legacy of poetry, literature, or patronage that challenged the notion of a purely private female existence. Their survival was not just physical, but intellectual and spiritual, finding freedom within the confines of their minds. Access to advanced education was a privilege largely reserved for women of the elite aristocratic and wealthy equestrian classes. These girls, as mentioned earlier, might have private tutors, often highly educated Greek slaves or freedmen, who taught them beyond basic literacy. They delved into Greek and Latin literature, rhetoric, though not for public speaking, philosophy, history, and sometimes even music and astronomy. The purpose, from a patriarchal viewpoint, was still largely to make them more refined companions for their powerful husbands, capable of engaging in sophisticated conversations at banquets and demonstrating the family's cultural sophistication. However, for many of these women, the pursuit of knowledge became an end in itself, a personal passion that offered immense intellectual stimulation and a world beyond the immediate confines of their domestic duties. These intellectually inclined women often formed private literary or philosophical circles. They would read aloud to each other, discuss texts, and engage in debates. Though these gatherings were typically private and intimate, they provided a vital space for intellectual exchange and validation among women who shared a love for learning. Imagine a group of Roman ladies, perhaps in a quiet corner of a lavish villa, not gossiping about fashion, but earnestly discussing the merits of Stoic philosophy or dissecting a passage from Virgil. These were rare but precious moments of intellectual camaraderie that fed their minds and spirits. Some Roman women even dared to engage in creative pursuits, leaving behind fragments of their artistry. Poetry and writing. Though few of their works survive, historical accounts and inscriptions suggest that some women composed poetry, letters, and even historical accounts. The poet Sulpicia, active during the Augustan age, is perhaps the most notable example, with 6 poems attributed to her, offering a rare female voice expressing love and desire. Her existence alone proves that women could, and did, engage in literary creation. Patronage of arts. Wealthy women could also exert significant influence as patrons of the arts. By commissioning works from poets, artists, and architects, they not only shaped Roman culture but also gained a form of indirect power and recognition. This allowed them to express their aesthetic tastes and support intellectual endeavors without directly creating them themselves. Music and performance. While professional musicians and actresses often belonged to lower social classes or were enslaved, aristocratic women were taught to play instruments like the lyre or harp and to sing. These were accomplishments meant for private entertainment, or small social gatherings, but for some, they offered a genuine artistic outlet and a means of emotional expression. The difficulties faced by these intellectual and artistic women were considerable. They often had to contend with the societal perception that intellectual pursuits were unfeminine or even dangerous, distracting them from their proper roles. Moralists often criticized women who were too learned, or who expressed their opinions too forcefully. Their works, if any, were often published under male pseudonyms or through male intermediaries, further obscuring their contributions. The very act of engaging with complex ideas or creating art required a significant degree of inner strength and courage to defy, even subtly, the prevailing norms. Despite these hurdles, their pursuit of intellect and artistry served as a powerful survival strategy. Intellectual escape, for many, the world of books, ideas, and creative expression offered a profound escape from the mundane or restrictive realities of their daily lives. It was a mental sanctuary where their minds could roam free. Personal fulfillment, engaging with their intellect and artistic talents, provided a deep sense of personal satisfaction and accomplishment that transcended external expectations. It was a source of identity and meaning that was truly their own. Enhanced influence. For some, their refined intellect and cultural sophistication made them more valuable companions and advisors to their husbands, subtly enhancing their indirect influence. Legacy. Though rare, the ability to leave behind a written work or a commissioned piece of art allowed these women to achieve a form of immortality, their voices echoing through time, challenging the silence imposed on so many others. The unextinguished flames of intellect and artistry among Roman women remind us that even within the most rigid social structures, the human spirit's yearning for knowledge, beauty, and self-expression can never be fully suppressed. These women, through their quiet dedication and sometimes their daring artistic ventures, carved out their own spaces of autonomy and left a legacy that continues to inspire, proving that true survival encompasses not just the body, but the mind and soul. While much of the preceding discussion has focused on the general experiences and societal expectations for Roman women, history, as always, offers fascinating exceptions, individuals who, by their sheer will, extraordinary circumstances, or unique roles, transcended or outright defied the norms of their time. These women became powerful symbols, challenging conventional gender roles and offering glimpses into what was possible, even within a patriarchal society. Their lives, though not representative of the average Roman woman, highlight the inherent human capacity to push boundaries and survive in ways that reshape perception. Perhaps the most prominent examples of women who wielded immense power were the imperial women of the Julio-Claudian dynasty and beyond. Figures like Livia Drusilla, the wife of Augustus, were masters of indirect political influence, as touched upon earlier. But Livia's power was arguably unprecedented. She was not just a discreet advisor, she was a political force, managing vast wealth, owning significant property, and holding immense sway over her husband and, crucially, the succession of the empire. She cultivated a public image of traditional Roman virtue while expertly navigating the treacherous waters of imperial politics. Her influence was so great that whispers of her involvement in various political machinations, though often unproven, underscored the perceived power she held. She lived a long life, outliving Augustus, and continued to be a formidable figure, a testament to her intelligence, resilience, and shrewd understanding of power dynamics. Later imperial women, such as Agrippina the Younger, mother of Nero, also broke traditional molds. Agrippina was openly ambitious, actively engaging in politics, writing memoirs, and even having coins minted with her image alongside the emperor. She wielded considerable influence, for a time, over her son Nero's rule. While her ultimate fate was tragic, her story demonstrates a bold, often aggressive, pursuit of power that directly challenged the ideal of the demure Roman matrona. These women, though often criticized by male historians for their ambition, were undeniably powerful, operating at the highest echelons of Roman society and politics. Beyond the imperial court, other women defied the norm in less dramatic but equally significant ways. Female gladiators, gladiatrices, though extremely rare and often looked down upon, archaeological evidence and written accounts confirm the existence of women who fought as gladiators. These were often slave women or free women, and their participation in such a brutal, masculine spectacle was a radical departure from conventional female roles. Their existence highlights the fluidity of Roman society and the willingness of some women, perhaps out of economic desperation or a thirst for fame, to embrace professions typically reserved for men. Their survival was a literal fight for life in the arena. Female performers. While acting was a stigmatized profession, women did participate in mimes and theatrical performances. These women often came from the lower classes or were enslaved, and their lives were precarious, but they earned a living through public performance, captivating audiences and carving out a space for themselves in the entertainment industry. Highly educated and publicly active women. While rare, some elite women were not just privately intellectual but also engaged in public discourse. Hortensia, in 42 BC, famously delivered a powerful speech before the triumvirs, successfully arguing against attacks on wealthy Roman women. Her eloquence and courage in a male-dominated political arena remain a testament to what a determined Roman woman could achieve when pushed to defend her rights. These exceptions served as powerful symbols, both admired and condemned, within Roman society. They were objects of admiration. For some, they represented strength, intellect, and courage, breaking through the conventional limitations. Hortensia, for instance, was celebrated for her oratorical skills. Targets of criticism. For many traditionalists, these women were seen as dangerously transgressive, undermining the moral fabric of society by stepping outside their proper spheres. Writers like Livy and Juvenal often voiced strong disapproval of women who were too wealthy, too independent, or too public. This criticism, however, paradoxically confirms their existence and influence. The survival of these exceptional women depended on a unique blend of factors. Immense wealth and social standing. For imperial women, their unparalleled status provided a protective shield, allowing them to exert power without immediate reprisal. Exceptional talent and drive. Whether political acumen, intellectual brilliance, or physical prowess, these women possessed extraordinary abilities that allowed them to excel in unconventional roles. Strategic alliances. Many relied on powerful male protectors or patrons who tolerated, or even encouraged, their unorthodox roles. Sheer audacity. A willingness to defy deeply ingrained social norms and face public scrutiny was essential for those who chose to live outside the established boundaries. These exceptions remind us that while the majority of Roman women navigated life within strict societal confines, the Roman world was not monolithic. It contained spaces, however small, for individuals to challenge expectations and define their own versions of existence. These symbolic figures, through their extraordinary lives, underscored the underlying tension between prescribed gender roles and the human spirit's desire for autonomy and influence, leaving behind a legacy that continues to fascinate and inspire. Having journeyed through the intricate lives of Roman women, examining their societal roles, legal constraints, personal struggles, and remarkable strategies for survival, we arrive at the final chapter. This is where we reflect on their enduring legacy and how their stories, often quietly etched in history, continue to resonate in our understanding of gender, power, and human resilience. What lessons can we draw from the struggles and triumphs of these women who lived 2 millennia ago? The most immediate legacy of Roman women lies in their fundamental contribution to the perpetuation of Roman society. They were the bedrock of the family, the primary unit of Roman civilization. Through their tireless domestic management, their endurance of childbirth, and their dedication to raising children, they literally sustained the Roman world, ensuring the continuation of lineages, the preservation of property, and the moral upbringing of future citizens. Without their often unseen labor and unwavering commitment, the grandeur of Rome's political and military achievements would have been impossible. Their influence on Roman culture, though rarely credited in public monuments, was profound, shaping the values and character of successive generations from within the home. However, their legacy extends beyond the purely domestic. Roman women, despite their restricted legal rights, gradually gained a degree of economic and social agency that was quite progressive for the ancient world. The development of sine manum marriages allowed many to retain control over their dowries and personal wealth, making them significant economic players in their own right. Their presence as shopkeepers, artisans, and even large-scale investors, though often overlooked, demonstrates a pragmatic adaptability that fueled the Roman economy. This burgeoning, if often indirect, economic power laid some groundwork for later discussions about women's financial autonomy. Furthermore, the very existence of exceptions, the powerful empresses like Livia, the courageous orator Hortensia, or the revered Vestal Virgins, serves as a powerful symbol of what was possible, even within a patriarchal system. These women, through their intellect, ambition, or sacred duty, pushed against the boundaries of their prescribed roles, demonstrating the potential for female leadership and influence. While they were not typical, their stories became part of the Roman narrative, offering glimpses of female strength that transcended mere domestic virtue. They are historical reminders that individuals can, and often do, challenge the prevailing norms of their time. The way Roman women are remembered is often complex and contradictory, reflecting the biases of the male-dominated historical records. On one hand, epitaphs and official pronouncements praise them for their pietas, pudicitia, and frugalitas, their piety, modesty, and frugality. On the other, satirical poets and moralists often depicted women as overly luxurious, ambitious, or morally lax, especially if they deviated from traditional roles. This duality in remembrance highlights the tension between the societal ideal and the varied, often complex, realities of women's lives. It also reminds us, as modern interpreters of history, to critically examine the sources and seek out the nuanced truths behind generalized portrayals. In the modern context, the struggles and survival of Roman women continue to offer invaluable lessons about gender, power, and resilience. The enduring nature of patriarchal structures, their lives serve as a stark reminder of how deeply entrenched patriarchal systems can be, dictating everything from legal rights to social expectations. The power of indirect influence. The Roman Matrona's mastery of social networks and subtle persuasion offers a timeless lesson in how influence can be wielded even without formal authority. It speaks to the power of building relationships and navigating complex social dynamics. Adaptability and resilience, faced with immense pressures, from arranged marriages and dangerous childbirth to limited legal recourse, Roman women exhibited extraordinary adaptability and an unwavering will to survive. Their stories are a testament to the human spirit's capacity to find meaning and purpose even in restrictive circumstances. The evolution of rights, the gradual, though often slow, expansion of women's property rights and, for some, freedom from guardianship, demonstrates that even ancient societies could evolve. It reminds us that progress, however incremental, is possible. The importance of individuality, the unextinguished flames of intellectual and artistic women, and the bold actions of the exceptional, underscore the human drive for self-expression and the quiet defiance that can exist within seemingly rigid systems. The echoes of Roman women resonate today, not just as historical figures but as testaments to the universal human experience of navigating limitations and striving for a meaningful existence. Their legacy is a call to remember the silent struggles and triumphs of countless individuals whose lives, though lived in the shadow of grand empires, formed the very fabric of history. By understanding their difficulties and celebrating their profound resilience, we gain a deeper appreciation for the enduring strength of women throughout time, and the continuous quest for equality and self-determination that echoes from ancient Rome to our present day.